What's up, guys? It's Mike for Sim Racing 604, and welcome back to Project Cars 2 here at Spa in the Renault RS01. So, as you can probably ascertain by the title of the video, I wanted to look at what it's like to drive this game with a controller. I typically drive with the Thrustmaster T300. But I know a lot of you drive with controllers, and I know it was part of the last major update, so I wanted to just kind of get a feel for myself. Now, I don't usually drive with a controller, so you're not dealing with an expert that can really control everything, as you can tell by that first little jaunt through Eau Rouge there. But wanted to see if it's at all playable, because I've heard it described as undrivable with a controller, so I wanted to just sort of get a frame of reference here and see if it is in fact undrivable, especially for a guy like me who has lots of sim racing experience but not much experience with a controller. And I gotta tell you, I took some laps in it a little bit earlier, and re-entered Spa here, and I'm pretty neutral on it. I gotta say, I don't think it's perfect by any means, but I do think it is drivable. Undrivable is not what I would call it. The record for this car track combination is a 214, presumably with a wheel, and I managed to get down near the 220 mark with a controller. So I don't think that's too terrible. And again, you're dealing with somebody who doesn't usually drive with a controller, so presumably if you got used to the controller, or if you drive racing games typically with a controller, you could probably put in a lot better times. So I think overall I would, if I was rating this 1 to 10, I would say this is about a 6 or a 7 with controller. I've certainly driven worse racing games to drive on a controller, but by no means is it perfect. It's hard to keep smooth, and that again could be me. I'm running with the Xbox controller here on my PC, and trying to keep it as smooth as possible, but it is very difficult, especially after getting used to the smoothness of running with a racing wheel. Now, I understand completely that racing wheel isn't going to be for everybody, and I think that's an important point, because I have spent, I would guess, $800 to $1,000 on my racing wheel setup, and I understand that that is not for everybody. You can find certainly better deals on racing wheels, and I probably spent too much on what I got. However, it's not unusual for us who race with wheels to spend well north of $500 US on a decent wheel and pedal setup, and a gear shift on top of that, potentially even an e-brake. So if that's, if you don't have the space in your place for a wheel, or don't have the money for it, or just don't have a desire to race with a wheel, it's important, I think, for these racing sims to respect the fact that a lot of drivers are going to be driving with a controller. So I did this video recently for Gran Turismo Sport, and I was reasonably happy with how Gran Turismo Sport handled with a controller, but keep in mind that is a console-only game, so presumably they would have a lot more controller users for that game. Project Cars 2 being on multiple platforms, PC, Xbox, and PlayStation 4, I think should be preparing themselves for the fact that they're going to have a lot of different controller inputs. And I don't think it's perfect yet, but good to know. As I said in my review of the version 1.2 update, I think it is important to recognize that they are working on improvements. They are listening to us and working on things. They've already made some improvements to the controller handling in this game. I think what they actually changed, I think the wording was the default assists when driving with a controller. So it's possible that just traction control and ABS, something like that, is what's been enabled by default. So they might not have actually improved the controls, but I gotta say, I'm running a decently clean lap here, and again, I don't drive controller all that often, so I think it speaks to the fact that this is quite drivable with only a controller, and that's good news, again, for those of us who either choose not to buy, or cannot afford to buy, or don't have the space to accommodate a wheel in their home. So, good news. I could see myself really liking this if I didn't have the wheel, but I do run a wheel typically, and I think that is still my preference, just simply for the smoothness of the curve. There is some advantages, I think, to running with a controller. They're a bit harder to spot, perhaps, but I like the idea of being able to feather the gas with my finger. I can move my finger, obviously, a lot faster than I can move my foot up and down, so good news on that front, but overall I think I just really prefer to drive racing with a wheel, so I will be going back to my T300, but I think this game is certainly it's drivable, certainly very drivable, and not terrible, but there are some improvements to be made. I'd like for them to find a way. It would be so awesome if they could find a way to make it a bit more smooth through the curves, even for an amateur, a controller amateur like myself. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know please in the comments what you think about driving with a controller with this game. I'm driving on PC. Is it different on console? What's been your experience driving with a controller? And please let the world know and we'll start a healthy discussion. Alright guys, thanks again for watching.